think you understand, as I did not understand, how a polygraph examination works. I mean, I thought, like probably a lot of you thought, that they bring you into a room, they sit you down, they hook you up to all this paraphernalia, and then they say, are you sitting down? Are you standing up? Are you Patsy Ramsey?
Now, if you got a transcript just of that sentence from Patsy Ramsey, what word would stand out as showing that this is an educated person? Well, paraphernalia. Have you ever used that word? How many people do you know that word? Do you know that word?
Paraphernalia.
I wish they would open their eyes and their minds and their hearts and know that we did not kill our daughter and that a killer walks the streets of this country, and we need to be looking for that person. As long as there is a killer at large who has murdered our child, our lives will never go on.
You said 2 weeks ago, Alex, that the list of suspects was narrowing. Is it continuing to narrow, and can you give us a ballpark figure for how many people might be on that list?
I can't give you a ballpark figure. I would say that it is where it was the last time I spoke to you.
My question would be, they've taken the test from the best. Why would you expect them now to go back and take an FBI test?
The tension might be that the questions were pretty soft. I mean, if the FBI were to give the test,
kill your daughter? I don't think so.
Listen,
What's next? What's next? A bed of coals?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Now,
I give workshops to the FBI examiners.
these people, by the way, these people have taught at the FBI.
That chuckling you're hearing in the background is from a handwriting expert for the Ramseys gloating that they actually taught the CBI's handwriting experts. And this happened at a press conference to promote, to celebrate, to cheerlead the Ramseys passing a polygraph in the year 2000.
Your lawyers advised you then not to submit to police questions. Why not, people say? Wouldn't you have wanted to tell them everything?
Well, I don't recall that our lawyers told us that at the time. We were perfectly willing and anxious to work with the police to find the killer.
Let's just say this person was in the law enforcement arena and would have reason to know what they were speaking about. And basically advised me that John and Patsy needed attorneys right away, that they were being targeted for JonBenet's death.
Is it Patsy's handwriting or isn't it? Did Patsy write the ransom note or didn't she? Did their lawyers tell them not to talk to the police or didn't they? Did the Ramseys take a polygraph and pass it? Yes or no? Well, let's go to the first question. Did their lawyers tell them not to talk to the police? You can argue, as John does here, that the lawyers never told them not to talk to the police. Or you can argue that this was hinted or implied. But then there's the sort of bottom line. Did their lawyers like the idea of the Ramseys talking to the police? Did the Ramseys like the idea of talking to the police as well? And so at the end of the day, did the Ramseys talk to the police when the police wanted them to talk to the police? In the Ramseys case, ask a simple question and you almost always get a complicated answer. Did Patsy write the ransom note? You can argue that their expert said she didn't. You can argue that she gave several samples and some experts thought that she did. But what is the bottom line? Did the Ramseys cooperate with the police? You can argue they did, you can argue they didn't, and then there's sort of a bottom line. Did the police feel that they did? There are also all sorts of narrative kinks and hijinks. There can't be no footprints in the snow if there's no snow. Suddenly there's no snow. Who would look at a walkway like this and think to say, I don't see footprints in the snow? Let me reiterate, you're standing here inside this picture. In what world are you going to turn to your companion and say, you know what, I don't see footprints in the snow? You would only say that if there was snow. The narrative kinkiness has so many twists and turns in this case, doesn't it? The Ramseys don't ever seem to handle the ransom note or read it, but somehow this is avoided during interviews. Burke doesn't seem to be worried about his sister or present in the house when everyone arrives, and then suddenly he isn't even there anymore. Then later on is the object of a $750 million lawsuit. And so in a broad way, one has to ask, is the slipperiness of the narrative a similar slipperiness that we see with the ransom note, where we asked to think about a foreign faction and movie quotes and good Southern common sense? And what about the sheer drama of the ransom note? Is that the sort of thing a drama queen or king might write?
Are you sitting down? Are you standing up? Are you Patsy Ramsey? The question, I mean, this is real layman's terms, but you spend a large amount of time in basically an interrogation kind of situation. Then you're hooked up for, a series of yes/no questions. I'm insulting the guy.
You can watch what Patsy's doing and her facial expressions and her demeanor with the sound off, or you can listen carefully with the sound on. The question is, who is this person who wrote the mysterious, mischievous, teasing, playful, and ultimately bogus ransom note? Is this mysterious, mischievous, teasing, playful, ultimately bogus person Patsy Ramsey, or is this mysterious, mischievous, teasing, playful, ultimately bogus person somebody else? Someone else that's also kind of into pageantry. And so the question does come up, whoever wrote the ransom note, what does he or she sound like apart from that ransom note? What does he or she look like in real life? What do they do for fun?
I'm insulting the guy.
It appears that you went through this process.
We call it pre-test interview, not interrogation.
Okay, well, anyway, take it from me.
The act of interrogation.
Yeah, and then afterwards, they question again, some more,
Someone asked me in the comments, why 3 pages? If Patsy wrote the note, why 3 pages? Well, to draw attention to the note and away from searching for JonBenet. But it wasn't just to distract attention a little, but a lot, for a while. If that's true, and if the friends were summoned there for the same reason, not just one friend, but 2 couples and a reverend, doesn't one get a sense that there isn't a little distraction going on, but an awful lot? And it seems like something big is on the cards here. And so if there is distraction, pageantry, or even distracting pageantry, whatever you want to call it, regardless of what you want to call it, if that was what was being brought to bear, didn't it work? And now I want to deal with a separate area of narrative kinkiness or hinkiness. And the reason I mention all of this for 8 minutes is to prepare you, to show you these other possible patterns, and then to say, aren't we seeing the same kind of pattern in terms of the polygraphs? And many of you have asked in the comments why the Ramseys weren't polygraphed, right? While others seem to think they were repeatedly polygraphed and they repeatedly passed them. Well, what is the truth? Well, the fact is the polygraph issue actually only came up after the grand jury trial fizzled, and 6 months later the Ramseys were well on their way on the publicity circuit promoting their recently published book.
The Ramseys go into greater detail in their book, The Death of Innocence.
And it was in one of their first interviews that the Ramseys were asked on March 17th, 2000 by Barbara Walters, why haven't you taken a polygraph? And they replied, well, we've never been asked.
Why didn't you take a lie detector test?
No one ever asked us
Really?
to take a lie detector test.
Police never asked you to take a lie detector test?
No.
And after saying that they've never been asked, John immediately says after that, well, it was posed to him way back when in 1997 as a hypothetical. Do you really think it was posed as a hypothetical? And if it was posed as hypothetical, why would he be insulted by it?
I was asked during my interview with Steve Thomas a hypothetical questions. One of the policemen that investigated this murder. He said, if I were to ask you to take a lie detector test, what would you say? And I said, I would be offended.
But isn't the hypothetical answer to that hypothetical question no? If we ask you to take it and you're offended, does that mean yes or no? In that same interview, Patsy appears genuinely tearful. In fact, I think it's the most raw grief I've ever seen on Patsy's face in a television interview.
I knelt down over her and just laid my body on her body and my cheek against her cheek, and it was cold. And I just kept saying, no, no, you know, ask God. Ask God to raise her.
Isn't it strange how seldom you see that kind of genuine emotion, a mother for her daughter, in this case? You just don't seem to see it very often. And compare this genuinely grieving footage of Patsy to the levity post-Polygraph that I showed you at the beginning of this video. I mean, that was just a few weeks later where Patsy looked and sounded very different, almost cocky, when talking about the same thing.
What was I thinking? I had JonBenet's face in my mind from the moment I went into that room. And I just kept saying, this is for you, honey.
Accuracy, honesty, and mistrust were the themes during the Ramsey news conference in Atlanta.
But the upshot of that question in that interview with Barbara Walters was that the cop said, we'd love it. We'd love it if you would do a lie detector test. And this became such a big issue. By the time they sat down for their very next interview with Larry King, it was already top billing. It was the very first thing he asked them.
Good evening. It's a great pleasure to welcome the Ramseys to this edition of Larry King Live.
And here's the bit straight off the bat about the polygraph.
First on something directly current, and then we'll get into a little history. You had said recently in an interview that you were willing to take a lie detector test, and apparently the Boulder police are now saying, let's set it up. Will you do it?
We were asked, had we been asked to take a lie detector test? We said no. We were asked, would we? We said certainly we would. We would expect it to be fair, and we would expect the results to be public.
Why not just answer yes? If you think about that question, why not just answer with a yes? Why all this business with fair and public, and of course it was going to be fair, and of course it was going to be made public. And then of course there's the bottom line, the way it was conducted by experts picked by the Ramseys, and then you've got to ask, was it fair given... If you are a suspect in a particular case, should you be the one that determines who polygraphs you? Should the police abide by that? And was the publicity afterwards fair, given that there were inconclusive results as well? And when I say as well, I mean the handwriting, remember, was inconclusive to some extent as well. And I think the polygraph narrative is a parallel dimension to the handwriting analysis narrative, and even arguably to the grand jury verdict narrative. I mean, in the sense that they aren't immediately in the clear, and what actually happened in all of these narratives isn't immediately clear. It seems to be clear. There's a particular narrative that's out there, but the reality is somewhat different. And I think this headline from the New York Post says it all. Ramseys try again and pass lie test. And what does that mean? It means they didn't just take the lie detector test, even using their own experts, and pass it. They had to do it again and again, and then they eventually passed it. And look at this from the New York Post. Previously, they had been tested by polygraph examiner Jared Torriello of Clifton, New Jersey, who deemed the results inconclusive. That's according to their own lawyer, Lynn Wood. Torriello suggested they be retested. That's where the try again comes from. And he recommended Gelb, a former president of the American Polygraph Association, who has worked for the FBI and the Defense Department. So here we have a similar situation to the Ransom note with the polygraphs. They just can't quite pass or be completely excluded. And wouldn't you say that echoed broadly, of course, the grand jury's assessment as well, which, bear in mind, the grand jury came out in October 1999. We are now in early 2000. It's barely 6 months later. But at this time in early 2000, no one knew what the grand jury had really voted, what the grand jury really thought, what the grand jury really made of the evidence, what the grand jury really made of in terms of the author of the ransom note, what the grand jury really made of whether they believed Patsy or John, were they telling the truth, what the grand jury really thought about the competing theories. But let me ask you, if you were to conduct these polygraphs, what questions would you ask? And we'll deal with that in the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button. You can have a look on your mobile, scroll to the right, that's where you hit the thanks button, and I'll see you guys next time.